Tonight on ABC News Live Prime, former President Bill Clinton testifies in the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. The House panel questioning the former president for hours. Bill Clinton making it clear from the start, saying, "I saw nothing and I did nothing wrong."
I'm Rachel Scott here in Chappaqua, where Bill Clinton just testified behind closed doors. I'll have new details on what I just learned from my sources about what he said inside and also about what comes next.
Tonight, a crucial deadline expiring just a short time ago. The Pentagon's ultimatum threatening to cut ties with AI giant Anthropic. It's technology currently used by the U.S. military. What Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is demanding and why the company is refusing to cross its own red lines. Also tonight, Savannah Guthrie's new plea for the return of her mother, 84-year-old Nancy Guthrie, asking, please bring her home, reminding anyone with information they can be anonymous. President Trump signaling he's losing patience over nuclear talks with Iran. The president saying he's not happy with negotiations.
I'm in a panel in Tel Aviv. This region is on high alert this weekend as the U.S. military moves its assets into place.
Military mistake. A Customs and Border Protection drone shot down. How did this happen? A deadly tram derailment at rush hour. At least one person killed, dozens injured. The tram jumping the tracks, slamming into a building. Literally stuck in the mud. A man reported missing for days, found trapped in shoulder-deep mud. And a scary moment on the field. One of the greatest players of all time, Lionel Messi, tackled to the ground by a fan. A security guard chasing him off.
From ABC News World Headquarters in New York, this is Prime with Linsey Davis.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Stephanie Ramos in for Linsey Davis. Thank you so much for streaming with us. We begin tonight with former President Bill Clinton locked in a marathon deposition, testifying for more than 6 hours behind closed doors before the House Oversight Committee investigating the case of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. Clinton, the first former president ever compelled to testify to Congress, saying in his opening statement, "I saw nothing and I did nothing wrong." Lawmakers say he answered every question and never took the fifth. Clinton defending his wife, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, who was deposed Thursday and shamed the committee for making her come in after she said she had no recollection having ever met Epstein. The former president testifying he broke off contact with Epstein more than 20 years ago, insisting if he had known what Epstein was doing, quote, "I would have turned him in myself." Tonight, President Trump weighing in on Bill Clinton's testimony, saying he doesn't like seeing him deposed. This comes months after he called on the FBI to investigate the relationship between the two men. The president also suggesting Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick could testify about his own ties to Epstein, calling Lutnick a very innocent guy. Senior political correspondent Rachel Scott leads us off now from Chappaqua, New York.
Tonight, former President Bill Clinton becoming the first president in American history forced to testify before Congress. Grilled for several hours by the Republican-led House Oversight Committee about his relationship with sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
I think the American people have a lot of questions.
In his opening statement, the former president declaring, "I saw nothing and I did nothing wrong," insisting I had no idea of the crimes Epstein was committing, adding, even with 2020 hindsight, I saw nothing that ever gave me pause. Clinton has not been accused of any wrongdoing. He did have a friendly relationship with Epstein. The Justice Department's Epstein files show him posing with young women. He's pictured here in a pool alongside Epstein's accomplice, convicted sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell, and then here in a jacuzzi with an unidentified woman. Sources tell us the former president told lawmakers he did not know who that woman was, and when asked if he had sex with her, he testified he did not. His testimony comes after his wife, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, spent nearly 7 hours with the committee.
I don't know how many times I had to say I did not know Jeffrey Epstein.
Bill Clinton today saying bringing his wife in to testify was simply not right. Democrats today saying since Republicans subpoenaed Hillary Clinton, they should also speak to the current First Lady, Melania Trump, since she actually did know Epstein. But first and foremost, they want to hear from President Trump, who had a long friendship with Epstein.
Republicans have now set a new precedent, which is to bring in presidents and former presidents to testify. We are now asking and demanding that President Trump officially come in and testify in front of the Oversight Committee.
Republicans refused to call the president in.
Ranking Member Garcia asked President Clinton, quote, should should President Trump be called to answer questions from this committee? And President Clinton said, that's for you to decide. And the president went on to say that the president, Trump, has never said anything to me to make me think he was involved, and he meant with Epstein. So I know there's a lot of curiosity about President Trump. I thought that was an interesting thing that President Clinton said.
President Trump, who has directed the Justice Department to investigate Bill Clinton's Epstein ties, today said this.
Look, I like him, and I don't like seeing him deposed.
And Rachel Scott joins us now from Chappaqua. Rachel, when might we see the full transcripts and video of both Bill and Hillary Clinton's depositions?
Well, Stephanie, we are expecting it in the coming days. At least that's what the chairman of the committee told us today. They say they are now working as quickly as possible to make both the video of these depositions and also the transcripts available to the American people so they could hear what the Clintons had to say for themselves, Stephanie.
Rachel Scott for us there in Chappaqua. Thanks so much, Rachel. President Trump has directed federal agencies to cease use of Anthropic technology. This as a critical deadline expired. The Pentagon had given Anthropic an ultimatum to drop restrictions on how its technology is used, or the Pentagon will terminate the partnership. Chief Global Affairs correspondent Martha Raddatz has the latest.
Tonight, an extraordinary showdown between the Pentagon and tech giant Anthropic over their artificial intelligence currently used by the Pentagon. At issue, Anthropic wants to prevent the Pentagon from having unfettered access to their most advanced AI, the company concerned about the possibility of fully autonomous weapons, where AI makes the final decisions on when to fire and when to kill without humans in control. The company also saying it does not want its technology to be used for mass surveillance of American citizens. Tonight, with the showdown at an impasse, President Trump now ordering all federal agencies to immediately stop using Anthropic's technology, saying the U.S. will never allow a radical left woke company to dictate how our great military fights and wins wars. That decision belongs to your commander-in-chief and the tremendous leaders I appoint to run our military. And moments ago, Secretary Pete Hegseth moving to designate Anthropic a supply chain risk, essentially blacklisting the American company from government work. Hegseth saying America's warfighters will never be held hostage by the ideological whims of big tech. This decision is final.
And Martha Raddatz joins us now. Martha, how difficult will it be to replace Anthropic?
Well, Stephanie, Anthropic is the first AI company to use classified networks, and it is considered the most sophisticated, which will make it hard to replace. And the CEO of OpenAI, Anthropic's competitor, said earlier that his company and some others share the same red lines as Anthropic. Stephanie?
All right, this AI fight with the Pentagon will continue. We'll be watching it. Thank you so much, Martha. With more on all this, let's bring in Gregory Allen. He's a senior advisor at the Center for Strategic and International Studies. Gregory, great to have you. Thanks so much for your time. What does this all mean for national security?
Well, unfortunately, this is a tragic precedent that is being set by this Department of Defense. By labeling Anthropic a supply chain risk, they are punishing a company that has invested hundreds of millions of dollars in developing capabilities that are valuable to the Department of Defense. And what's so shocking about this decision is that the red lines that the Department of Defense says it now cannot stand, that's actually a subset of a much longer list that the department agreed to under President Trump in July 2025. So they're saying this is unacceptable. They've been operating under these and many more rules for about 9 months now, and there's been no crisis.
I would imagine that there would be some sort of repercussions, right, for both Anthropic and the Pentagon that may not be reversible. What are your thoughts on that? Could that happen?
Yes. When I served in the Department of Defense, we were still dealing with the crisis of Google choosing to pull out of Project Maven, which was the flagship AI initiative back there, and actually Anthropic is now a part of that program, at least its successor version. And there was more than 5 years of damaged relations between Silicon Valley and the Pentagon. And actually, we were now in a pretty good place by the time Trump took office, with most of the frontier AI companies eager to serve and support national security. But now we're in a very different state of affairs. Every company is effectively being told by the Department of Defense that if you take $1 from us, we reserve the right to sentence your company to what is very possibly, in Anthropic's case, a fatal blow. That's going to be a massive deterrent on any startup, any tech company thinking about working with the DoD in the future. And Anthropic faces equally severe consequences. They have to take into account the fact that this supply chain risk designation means not only can they not work with the Department of Defense, they cannot work with other companies that serve the Department of Defense. That's a huge share of the U.S. economy and a very dangerous blow to their business. And I'm sure what's going to be a big deterrent to investors looking at the AI market as a whole. This could legitimately have economy-wide consequences.
Well, we've heard what President Trump has to say about all of this. So what comes next?
Well, oddly enough, President Trump's post on Truth Social, which was simply saying that the Department of Defense and the U.S. government was no longer going to procure Anthropic services, was actually, I thought, a pretty reasonable end to this disagreement over contractual terms. It was Secretary Hegseth's decision to invoke the supply chain risk designation that was the radical and, in my view, unwarranted escalation of this debate. Now, that is a post on social media. It is not an official order at this stage. There are still details to be worked out in terms of what the supply chain risk designation format will take. But I have a very difficult time seeing this not as a story that ends up in court. And I think it's quite likely that Anthropic will win in court, not least of which because the threats that the Department of Defense was throwing around were not just to designate Anthropic a supply chain risk, but also to invoke the Defense Production Act. And that latter choice means that not only is Anthropic trustworthy, it's essential. So effectively, the Department of Defense has already undermined its own case for the supply chain risk designation. And that's why I expect that when I see this going to court, Anthropic has a very strong case.
Can we talk about the role Congress could play in all of this? Ahead of the deadline, top members of the Senate Armed Services Committee sent a private letter to Anthropic and the Pentagon, urging them to resolve their fight. So should Congress get involved here?
Yes, because this has such massive spillover consequences to the relationship between the Department of Defense and the commercial technology industry. As I said, this is a massive deterrent against companies who are currently commercial businesses thinking about how they can get involved in supporting national security. And that is something that Congress has to take very seriously. I wouldn't be surprised if we see calls for hearings as soon as this weekend.
And we should note Anthropic has been in use by the U.S. government and military since 2024. We'll see what happens. Gregory Allen for us tonight. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you.
And next tonight, the latest on nuclear talks with Iran. President Trump says he is not happy with negotiations. This as the U.S. designates Iran as a state sponsor of wrongful detention. ABC's Ian Pennell in the region for us again tonight.
Tonight, President Trump making it clear crucial talks with Iran aren't going well.
We're not happy with the negotiation. They just don't want to. They don't want to say the key words. We're not going to have a nuclear weapon. They have to say we're not going to have a nuclear weapon, and they just can't quite get there.
But Iran's repeatedly said it doesn't want a nuclear weapon. Also at issue, nuclear enrichment, which Iran claims they want for civilian purposes. Late today, President Trump ruling it out.
I say no enrichment. Not 20%, 30%. They always want 20%, 30%. They want it for civilian, for civil. I think it's uncivil. So I'm not happy with it, no.
The president saying no final decision's been made on military action, but all the pieces are in place for a strike. New satellite images show the massive military build-up in the region. Nearly a dozen F-22 fighter jets at a base in southern Israel. Rows of refueling and reconnaissance aircraft in Saudi Arabia. And 2 aircraft carrier strike groups now moving into position. It comes after a 12-day war between Israel and Iran last June, the US joining, bombing Iran's nuclear sites. President Trump repeatedly saying those facilities were obliterated. Critics questioning if that's the case, why Trump, who vowed not to drag America into foreign wars, may soon strike Iran again.
And ABC News foreign correspondent Ian Pannell joins us now from Tel Aviv. Ian, does it feel as though we're getting closer to a war?
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, certainly this is the region on edge. I mean, where we are in Tel Aviv has been eerily quiet. It's Shabbat this evening. Normally you'd expect to see quite a few people out. The streets are very quiet. I think a lot of people are staying at home. Now, if you listen to what the Iranians have been saying, they're sounding positive, like agreements have been made on some issues, others are outstanding. We saw the Omani foreign minister meet with Vice President J.D. Vance today. After that meeting, he posted on social media saying that peace is possible, peace is close at hand. But it really doesn't feel like that. Just now, the president saying, admitting really, that he has a very big decision to make, saying he'd rather do it the peaceful way, but that any deal has to be meaningful. And I just think the gap between what the Iranians are saying and what the Americans are demanding still remains large. And with this huge military presence now in the region, war may not be inevitable, but it's starting to look likely. Stephanie?
A region certainly on edge. Ian Pannell for us tonight. Thank you, Ian. Please stay safe. Now to the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie. Her daughter, Today Show host Savannah Guthrie, posting a new plea for her mother's return, saying, please bring her home. The family offering a $1 million reward, reminding anyone with information they can be anonymous. Here's ABC's Trevor Ault.
Nearly 1 month after Nancy Guthrie was abducted from her home, tonight Savannah Guthrie is renewing her plea for the critical tip that could lead to her mother, posting, please be the one that brings her home.
We need to know where she is. We need her to come home.
Savannah telling any potential tipster they can stay anonymous and still get her family's $1 million reward.
You can be anonymous if you want. Someone out there knows something that can bring her home. Somebody knows. And we are begging you to please come forward now.
Investigators are still hoping someone can identify the masked man with a gun at Nancy Guthrie's doorstep the night she was taken. If your tip qualifies for the reward, you can be paid in cash. When you make a tip, they provide a PIN number you'd present when picking up the money at a neutral location. No ID required, and it's not traceable with no questions asked.
Pima County Sheriff's Department.
Tonight, the Sheriff's Department is looking into videos like this one from Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood. A Ring video obtained by Fox News showing a car 2.5 miles from the home at 2:36 a.m., around the time Nancy was taken. Nancy Guthrie's pacemaker disconnected from her phone 8 minutes earlier at 2:28 a.m. That car is one of 12 captured on that camera between midnight and 6 a.m. Police have not said it has any connection to the abduction, but it's the kind of video investigators are asking residents to send them as they work through thousands of hours of footage.
And Trevor Ault joins us now. Trevor, where do we expect the investigation to go from here?
Well, Steph, the sheriff's office says they are refocusing the investigation. That is the term that they use. And the only specifics they provided are that detectives assigned to this case will be taking the lead from this point, and they'll have the option to add more resources to the investigation should future leads warrant it. Now, of course, we know they continue to review those thousands of hours of footage. They've also said they're going to maintain a patrol in Nancy Guthrie's neighborhood. Stephanie?
Hard to believe this has taken so long. Trevor, thank you. Questions are being raised tonight about how the U.S. military mistakenly shot down a drone being operated by Customs and Border Protection near the Texas-Mexico border. The military making use of a high-powered laser to do so. Could this lead to potential danger in the skies? Here's Whit Johnson.
Tonight, the FAA now restricting airspace near El Paso, Texas through June after yet another confusing and dangerous moment in the skies. The U.S. military using a high-powered laser to shoot down a drone they thought was a threat near the U.S.-Mexico border. But it was a drone being used by Customs and Border Protection, another U.S. agency. The incident troubling as those lasers could pose a threat to commercial aviation without coordination between agencies. In a statement, the Pentagon and other agencies saying the laser was used to mitigate a seemingly threatening unmanned aerial system operating within military airspace.
For the Department of Defense to shoot down a Customs and Border Protection drone would demonstrate a shocking break down air domain awareness.
It's the second time this month airspace in the area has been restricted after the laser technology was deployed. Just 2 weeks ago, the FAA issued an urgent temporary closure after CBP used it to shoot down what they believed was a threatening drone, but turned out to be a Mylar balloon, both of which are often used by Mexican cartels.
If the military and civilian law enforcement are going to continue operating together along the southern border, there needs to be dramatic improvements in coordination.
And Stephanie, the Pentagon and CBP insist they will work to increase communication to prevent incidents like this in the future. Stephanie?
Whit, thank you so much. Paramount Skydance is set to purchase Warner Brothers Discovery for $110 billion. Netflix declined to match Paramount's bid that Paramount took to Warner Brothers shareholders. The deal will create one of the largest film studios in the world, giving Paramount control over HBO, CNN, and DC studios, along with franchises such as Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, and Superman. Netflix confirmed in an SEC filing that they've received the $2.8 billion termination fee owed to them. Lawmakers on both sides of the aisle have raised antitrust concerns. The father of a Georgia high school shooting suspect took the stand in his own defense today. Colin Gray broke down during his testimony. Prosecutors have accused him of giving his son the weapon used in the shootings and ignoring multiple warning signs. ABC's senior national correspondent Steve Osunsami has the latest.
The father of the teenager accused of killing 2 students and 2 teachers at this suburban Atlanta high school is tearfully defending himself on the witness stand, saying he didn't see warning signs that his son could kill.
You know, he's a good kid. I don't know if anybody could ever see that kind of evil.
But prosecutors say that Colin Gray ignored too much, charging him with second-degree murder, saying that he bought his son this AR-15 style rifle used in the killings at Appalachia High School as a Christmas present, about 7 months after getting a visit from the sheriff's office saying that the FBI had flagged his son for allegedly threatening online to shoot up a different school. The father admitted to jurors that he kept guns in the home unlocked, even after conversations with his son about panic attacks and depression.
The gun was a thing that him and I used to bond with, and I was very clear on the rules.
Steve Osunsami joins us now. Steve, what comes next for Colin Gray and his son?
Well, his son is in custody tonight. He is still awaiting trial. He is now 16 years old. He is pleading not guilty to murder and other charges. A trial date for him has not yet been set. His father is pleading not guilty to second-degree murder and a number of other charges, more than 24. His father, though, is now part of what's being called a larger effort across the country to prosecute parents in these school shootings. Stephanie?
One of the latest cases in which parents are being put on trial after their children are accused in fatal shootings. Steve Osunsami for us tonight. Thank you so much, Steve. With us now to break down the legalese in this story is ABC News legal analyst Brian Buckmeyer. Brian, great to see you. Colin Gray is facing 29 charges in connection with the shooting that killed 4 people and wounded 9 others. How are prosecutors approaching his case?
Evening, Stephanie. I would say the way the prosecution's approaching this case would be very formulaic. It has a formula to it. They first presented the tragedy that was the school shooting, then presented a number of red flags that they believe the father knew or should have known, and as the law would say, willfully or recklessly disregarded those dangers, and he should have reasonably expected they could have harmed others. That's the formula that they're following in trying to prove this case, and they're just inputting the facts even as he's being cross-examined to try to prove that point.
And Brian, as you just heard, Colin Gray testified that the thought of his son harming anyone, quote, never crossed his mind. How does that differ from what the prosecution is arguing?
So for the prosecution, they're kind of arguing the same thing in that statement. It's really going to be, I would describe it as 2 sides of the same coin. Because for the prosecutions, they're going to say he didn't think that this could have happened. And the reason why they're saying he didn't think it is because he willfully disregarded dangers. They're going to show all of the red flags that he should have seen, he should have known, and should have calculated that, hey, maybe I don't keep access to a gun around a child who has these types of issues. But for the defense, they're going to say it's absolutely reasonable that he did not come to this conclusion. And if it's reasonable for him and the jury believes that it's reasonable as well, that could be a not guilty. So it really pivots on the idea as to whether or not this lack of belief is reasonable or not.
So we know that Colin Gray took the stand today, but what comes next in the case?
Yeah, so he will continue with cross-examination until he's done with his case. He might be on there for a little bit longer. You might have an expert in some field, shape, or form when it comes to being able to identify whether or not a child or a student is a threat to others. The defense might have an expert on for that regard. But really what we're looking at next is for the jury to be charged, given the instructions and understanding of how the case works, closing arguments, and then, of course, the verdict to see whether or not these facts fit into what we have seen now is the highest charge when it comes to a parent being charged for the actions of their child. We've seen manslaughter, we've seen child neglect, but we've never seen second-degree murder. And Georgia might be the first to create this precedent that could set ripple effects throughout the country.
And we'll see what direction this case takes. Thank you so much, Brian. At least 2 people are dead and 40 injured after a tram derailed in central Milan. The crash happened near a busy intersection when one of the city's newest trams came off the tracks and crashed through a shop window. There it is. One person who died was aboard the tram. The other was a bystander. The Milan Transport Company says it's working with authorities to determine what caused the derailment. NASA has announced a significant shakeup to its Artemis program schedule. NASA leaders announced it will no longer attempt a moon landing with Artemis 3. The mission, targeted for 2027, will instead test spacecraft docking and lunar landing systems in low Earth orbit. Officials say Artemis 2 is still on track for an April launch, which will send astronauts around the moon and back. Coming up here on Prime, we are wrapping up Heart Health Month with ABC's medical correspondent, Dr. Darian Sutton, with some tips on keeping up with your heart health. Black History Month also comes to an end. We're taking a look by the numbers at the history of the month as well as the contributions and achievements of Black Americans. And soccer legend Lionel Messi gets tackled as fans storm the field at the end of a match in Puerto Rico. We'll watch it play out right here. As we wrap up February, we're highlighting American Heart Month and tips to maintain good heart health. Here's Linsey Davis and ABC News medical correspondent Dr. Darian Sutton.
While February is Black History Month, it also marks American Heart Month, aimed at raising awareness for cardiovascular diseases and how things like high blood pressure can contribute to them. According to the American Heart Association, around 58% of Black adults have high blood pressure. That's higher than any other racial or ethnic group. They're also more likely to develop hypertension earlier in life. For more on this, we're joined by ABC News medical correspondent Dr. Darian Sutton. Thanks so much, as always, for joining us. Let's just start with the basics. Why is keeping your blood pressure under control so important?
Yeah, really important question. So blood pressure, when you sit down and get your blood pressure taken, any number, Linsey, over 130 over 80 is considered high blood pressure. 130, that top number, is when your heart squeezes. 80, that bottom number, is when your heart relaxes. And the reason why we're concerned about it as physicians is because untreated, unchecked blood pressure can cause wear and tear on your vital organs. That can cause a sudden heart attack or a stroke, and even increase your risk of long-term complications like heart disease, kidney disease, dementia, and even death. And so important to understand here, we've got symptoms associated with blood pressure, but the most common experience with high blood pressure is no symptoms at all. And the fact that it is silent means that millions of people are walking around with this silent risk that they're not aware of until it becomes a medical emergency.
What are some things that lead to hypertension?
Yeah, well, number one, our diet is often strongly associated with hypertension, and specifically in our diet, sodium is a really big factor here. CDC estimates show that 9 out of 10 Americans eat more than the recommended amount or the daily maximum recommended amount of sodium a day. That's about 2,300 milligrams. Ideally, you want to get that lower than 1,500 milligrams. But we've seen in studies, unfortunately, that there's overconsumption of this. And it's not from the salt shakers on your kitchen table. 70% of the sodium in our diet comes from processed foods, packaged foods. And we know that ultra-processed foods dominate the American diet. And that is also full of saturated fats, refined carbs, carbs and added sugars, and all of this collectively increases our risk. And then a big factor here is lack of access to care. We see a rising rate in the lack of access, lack of insurance, and without basic screening, many people, again, are walking around unaware of their risk.
And so we talk about Black people having more likely to have high blood pressure, including severely high blood pressure. When we talk about those disparities, is that in part of the answer?
It's strongly a part of the answer. And if you look back historically, you can see how the effects of segregation last until today and lead to communities that are under-resourced. And that inequality changes our health access. That inequality means that you're not easily able to get to healthy food. You don't have safe spaces to work out, because we know physical activity is a strong risk or modifying factor in reducing our risk of high blood pressure. And you also don't have access to quality care and preventative screenings. And collectively, that is compounded on Black communities, which leads to the disparities that we see today.
So what are some ways to maintain good heart health? And how would you know? I mean, I know you said that this is a silent kind of disease. So how would people get tested?
So important to understand here that lifestyle modifications are the foundation of prevention. But the main way that you'll know, Linsey, is by checking it. And we always advise everyone to at least check your blood pressure at least once a year to get that number, to get that trend. And understand that blood pressure rises and falls throughout our day depending on our stressors and our environments. But when you see that average number go above 130/80, that's when your risk begins. And this is so vital because studies have shown that the majority, over 60%, are just 10 points above that minimum or that threshold. And that means that we have a lot of room where we can lifestyle modify to get us down lower to that number, or to get us down to that appropriate number so that we don't absorb those risks. And then also understanding the basic dietary changes that you need to do in order to make sure that you get to that goal.
Dr. Darian Sutton, always appreciate you keeping us informed. Thanks so much.
Of course.
Really important information. Our thanks to Linsey and Dr. Darian Sutton. Coming up here on Prime, we're taking a closer look at the history of Black History Month, as well as the contributions and achievements of Black Americans by the numbers. Move over, Punch the Monkey. An Arizona zoo just introduced us to our new cutest obsession. Exactly what we need on a Friday. Welcome back to Prime. Here's a look at the stories making headlines right now. Former President Bill Clinton testified today in the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. He is the first ex-president to be deposed before Congress. The House panel questioned him behind closed doors for hours about his ties to Epstein. The former president making it clear from the start that he saw nothing and did nothing wrong, testifying that he broke off contact with Epstein more than 20 years ago. Lawmakers say he answered every question and never took the fifth. President Trump is signaling that he's losing patience over nuclear talks with Iran. The president saying he's, quote, not happy with the negotiations and is weighing limited strikes, but is still stressing his preference for diplomacy. Block, the company behind Square, Cash App, Afterpay, is cutting staff by 40%. That's about 4,000 jobs, according to a letter to shareholders by co-founder Jack Dorsey. Dorsey's comments explicitly naming AI as a key driver behind the move. He also posted the letter on X, or Twitter, a company he co-founded. The assertion that the job cuts will add to Block's profitability and efficiency led investors to jump in and buy, with the company's stock soaring more than 20% in pre-market trading today. Less than half of Americans, 47%, say religion is very important in their lives, a figure that has been on the gradual decline from 58% in 2012. According to a new Gallup poll, a record high 24% of Americans said they had no religion in 2025. That is up from 2% in 1948. Young adults are the most likely to not identify with a religion. Coming up here on Prime, the Basketball Africa League is still in its infancy, and a new 4-part documentary from ESPN explains its genesis. Our Perry Russell speaks with the director of the series. And an unusual planetary phenomenon will occur on Saturday, making many planets visible to the naked eye, all in the same part of the sky. We'll tell you the best strategies for seeing it. As Black History Month wraps up, we're taking a closer look at the history of the month, as well as the contributions and achievements of Black Americans by the numbers. Black History Month first started 100 years ago in 1926 as, quote, Negro History Week by historian and author Carter G. Woodson in order to promote the study and preservation of African American history. Woodson chose the second week in February to coincide with the birthdays of two people he felt were essential to the emancipation and freedom of Black Americans, Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass. In 1976, Gerald Ford became the first president to officially recognize February as Black History Month. But it wasn't until 1986 when Congress passed a resolution that Black History Month became legally acknowledged. Since then, the month has served as a way for the country to celebrate the contributions and achievements of Black Americans across politics, the arts, innovation, and more. Like Bessie Coleman, who in 1921 became the first African American to hold an international pilot license. Or inventor Garrett Morgan, who created the traffic light and patented it in 1923. In 1870, Hiram Revels became the first Black man to serve in the Senate, while Joseph Rainey became the first Black man to serve in the House. And it took almost another 100 years in 1968 when Shirley Chisholm became the first Black woman to serve in Congress. Hattie McDaniel became the first Black woman to win an Oscar in 1940 for her role in Gone with the Wind. The month is also a way for the country to reflect and learn more about the difficult history of Black Americans, like the period of enslavement starting in 1619. And while learning about this time is important, Black historians emphasize that Black history does not start and end with the period of enslavement in America and continues to be made every day. Coming up here on Prime, a man literally stuck in the mud for days. How this man was found and how he survived. And a fan runs onto the field and tackles one of the best soccer players in the world. Kind of a messy situation. A visible planetary alignment is coming. A man is rescued after days of being stuck in the mud. And move over, punch the monkey. We have a new cute obsession. These stories and more in tonight's rundown.
Oh, losing control into oncoming lanes of traffic, swerving, fishtailing. She's steering right into the curb.
A driver spun out of control during a late-night chase through the San Fernando Valley. During the pursuit, the suspect drove over a spike strip, shredding the tires and escaping police. At one point, the driver continued into oncoming traffic. The chase, however, didn't take long due to the flat tire, and the driver was taken into custody. A man in Florida who went missing on Valentine's Day was rescued after spending several days stuck in the mud with no food or water. He was found stuck in shoulder-deep mud and was brought to a hospital in critical condition. Authorities said the mud mimicked quicksand. First responders brought out ladders to reach him and ultimately freed him from that mud. This Saturday, sky gazers will have the chance to watch a planetary parade. Mercury, Venus, Saturn, and Jupiter will be visible to the naked eye, while Uranus and Neptune will require binoculars or a telescope. NASA said viewers do not have to worry about wearing protective eyewear, as they would to watch the solar eclipse. A planetary scientist from NASA said planetary parades occur due to the alignment of the planet's orbit around the sun, allowing gazers to view in awe. Soccer legend Lionel Messi got tackled as fans stormed the field at the end of a match in Puerto Rico. 3 people rushed to the field, including a shirtless man who sprinted, wrapping his arms around Messi, and then pulled him to the ground. Security guards rushed in during the encounter. Messi, you could see, quickly got up, but was visibly shaken by the encounter. No injuries were reported. The NFLPA released its annual team report card survey, ranking teams. The Miami Dolphins received the highest overall grade, while the Pittsburgh Steelers received the lowest. The Players Union has conducted a survey in each of the last 4 seasons, but earlier this month, the NFL won a complaint saying the NFLPA violated an agreement, but making the results of the survey public, saying it was, quote, disparaging to NFL clubs and individuals. An NFLPA spokesperson declined to comment on the report cards. The NFL Players Association asks players to rank various attributes of the 32 NFL franchises, including their locker room facilities, training staff, and team ownership. Arizona's Wildlife World Zoo revealed its name of their new baby hippo after receiving votes from fans. The animal was born on January 22nd and has been nameless until now. Jelly Bean received the most votes. The zoo, which is about 20 miles outside of Phoenix, has been flocked with visitors due to the adorable calf. The species of hippo called pygmy hippos are an endangered species with an estimated 2,500 still in the wild. Their births are a rare occurrence. Jelly Bean's arrival and legacy could play a part in their conservation, along with Moodang, Thailand's baby hippo that went viral last year. ESPN is out with a new documentary series, Origin, the story of the Basketball Africa League. Here's our Perry Russum.
The Basketball Africa League was decades in the making, a bold idea spanning 2 continents, bringing the best basketball players from Africa together to compete in a league of their own. Now streaming on ESPN, Origin, the story of the Basketball Africa League, shares how a league built on talent, ambition, and opportunity for all, with basketball being a unifying force across different cultures and languages, from the players on the floor to the leaders shaping its future, including former President Obama. Take a look.
Africa is a young continent. It is a continent full of extraordinary young talent, but so many of these kids just don't get exposure to opportunity. But with the Basketball Africa League, we think that Africa as a continent is primed to see basketball take off as a sport in a way that will be good for the continent and good for the world.
And joining us now is Emmy-nominated producer and director of Origin, the story of the Basketball Africa League, Richard Brown. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So you've worked on True Detective and Catch-22. Those are scripted shows, scripted series.
That's true, yes.
What about BAL's story did you feel like had to be done through a documentary here?
I think it was compelling right off the bat when I heard that the NBA was creating the first league it had ever created outside of North America, and that it was doing it across the African continent, which, you know, the African continent is 54 countries, which I think a lot of people over here don't realize, that it's 54 distinct countries. And that was already compelling to sort of dig in and learn more. And I found out quite quickly that people of the caliber of President Obama and Joakim Noah and Grant Hale and Forrest Whitaker and Dikembe Mutombo were involved. And that sort of made me want to know more.
What narratives about Africa does this documentary take on?
I think we're interested in exploring the disconnect in the narratives around Africa that people typically hear in the West. We typically tend to hear stories about, you know, poverty and aid, and, you know, or if it's positive, it tends to be about, you know, safaris. And I'd been to the continent a few times before I went to make this project, and that wasn't my experience at all. And then going there to film this, what we saw was the Africa we found was vibrant and vital and alive and modern.
What influence has President Obama had on the game in Africa?
I think President Obama's had a huge influence in Africa in general. And one of the ways he's had a big influence is that there's a complicated history between Africa and America, you know? And I think that the BAL, which President Obama is an advisor to the BAL and has been from the beginning, the BAL acts as a kind of bidirectional bridge between the 2 continents, by which I mean that there's obviously, it opens pathways for young Africans to, you know, to come and have opportunity.
You travel to so many countries in Africa, you met so many players. Is there one player story that sticks with you the most?
I'd say there's a couple. Mamadou Diop is a Senegalese sports teacher. He teaches in, you know, it's a very rural area, and he has to commute, so to speak, 3 times a week, 9 hours on, you know, a scooter and then a bus to Dakar to train with his players, his team. And he discovered, as we were filming him, that his team had qualified for the BAL, and he had this sort of life-changing opportunity. And that was great to be around that. That was inspiring. But on the other end of the spectrum, it was kind of exciting that J. Cole, one of the legendary hip-hop artists, J. Cole, signed up because each team is allowed to have 2 players from outside the continent on their roster. And J. Cole had almost become an NBA player. And so he, he sort of put his hand up and said, I'd love to go check it out. And he came and played in the first BAL for the Rwanda Patriots. and it was amazing to watch. It was his first time on the continent, and he came there to play as a, and he was good. He's a very good player, but also it was just great to watch his relationship with the kids in his team in Rwanda.
Richard, thank you for joining us tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
All 4 episodes of Origin, the story of the Basketball Africa League, are available now to stream on the ESPN app.
Our thanks to Perry. What a great conversation. Whether you run marathons or just jaunts around the block, you likely have Jeff Galloway to thank for improving how you feel, both during and after your run. Galloway was an Olympian who then became the father of innovative training methods. He died this week. Our Will Reeve has his story.
Let's talk about motivation.
He was a legendary runner among runners, Olympian and creator of an innovative running method, Jeff Galloway, dead at 80 years old. His daughter-in-law sharing the news on Instagram, writing, "It was never going to be enough time to learn from you, to watch how you loved, how you listened, how you always saw the best in everyone. We are heartbroken, but we are all better because of you." A member of the 1972 U.S. Olympic team, Galloway inspired everyone from elite athletes to everyday runners with his run, walk, run strategy, affectionately known as Jeffing, which he developed in 1974 to help new runners hit the road.
Jeff Galloway's run, walk, run method is the tried and true golden ticket. Everyone should be using it.
6 done. Last 30-second walk break. 7 miles done. Mr. Sir King Jeff Galloway, come to the front.
I walked 25 times during my half marathon, and it's actually the reason that I achieved a personal best. It's the main reason I can do these long distances and not feel awful. It also helps prevent injury, so overall it's a really good thing.
It caught on.
By developing that walk-run method, he made it accessible to the masses and made a sport that originally kind of felt like it was for people that were kind of gifted or born into running to be something that anybody could take on.
We're going to go from a walk, I'm on a walk break, into a shuffle.
Galloway died of a hemorrhagic stroke in Pensacola, Florida. In his final interview with the New York Times, he shared what he had hoped to accomplish in the coming years. "My mission now, at the age of 80 plus, is to show that people can do things that are normally not done and can do them safely."
An absolute legend. Jeff Galloway was part of the extended Disney family, serving as an official training consultant for Run Disney. He will certainly be missed. And our thanks to Will Reeve for that story. That is our show for this hour. I'm Stephanie Ramos. Stay tuned to ABC News Live for more context and analysis of the day's top stories. Thank you for streaming with us. Stay safe.